Okay, so I'm watching this video. This is a talk by Sutter. He's some guy, I think he's part of the C++ committee. I actually don't know who he is. I've heard his name before, but I don't really care. So he's presenting his experiment, which is some new syntax of C++, which makes it safer, better, more robust, more type safe, more memory safe, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about the syntax. I don't really care. What I care about is the reasoning as to why he's done this. And I would describe this now as a bit of a crisis in the C++ sphere. I would describe this as a moral panic, for sure, which is this notion of security. That C++ is not secure. You can't write code that is secure in C++. Now, I think that's an important discussion. But what I really do not like is how this argument is framed, because it doesn't really make much sense. Okay, so the solution that Sutter is proposing is that we have some new syntax which has more reasonable defaults, so that you can't, say, do an incorrect cast, or you can't, say, use pointer arithmetic and things like that. And he goes into detail about how they swapped out all their range-based pointer arithmetic stuff with spans, and how that's going to solve all the problems in the world. My problem is, now I'm not a security person, but I've written a lot of C++. I've written a lot of C as well, so I know my way around a pointer or two, which I'm starting to think that most C++ people don't even know what a pointer is. But anyway, isn't security an arms race, really? So every core guideline that you have now and will eventually be superseded by a new exploit. So aren't we just patching holes in a sinking ship at this point? Like, we're not addressing the root cause. Because even if, okay, why was there an error in the pointer arithmetic that means we have to use span? Why did that error happen? Well, let's think. They think it's because programmers make mistakes, which they obviously do, but they think it's because no one can reasonably, and I say they, I mean like Herb's, the argument being made is being made by quite a few people from what I've seen. They think that the idea of doing these kind of low-level things is basically beyond the comprehension of normal people, and thus we have to put training wheels in to help them. And I actually don't disagree with this, but I disagree with the training wheels that they're proposing. They're proposing you just swap out a different language construct, and then suddenly everything will be fine. Like, you can't use those incorrectly, or make a mistake, or introduce some new vulnerability that no one's even aware of yet, because that's just the nature of security race. My thought, and has always been, well, not always, but recently I suppose, is that why are they, and this is definitely a moral panic, because they're kind of playing a game. They've got confused as to why C did so well, and I mean C, not C++. And I think C did so well because it gives you full control over what you're doing. People like that. People like having control over their own problems. It's a very bottom-up approach to problem solving. Does it have problems? Yes, people make mistakes, obviously. But really, any addition to C, i.e. C++, should play into this fundamental philosophy about being bottom-up. They should give me, the programmer, the tools to not make a mistake, not to enforce a guideline which is essentially what this whole talk is about, because I think Herb Sutter is also one of the people who wrote the C++ core guidelines, which is hilarious because I've never read them and I don't know anyone who has. And I mean, for example, some of the advice is never use, or they teach people never to use a union and always use a variant. And the thing is, at face value, this is the thing, at face value, yes, okay, fine. But what about that time that I need to use a union, right? And this violates the very thing he talks about C++, which is the zero cost abstraction, or you don't pay for what you don't use. Well, actually, yeah, you do now. I think C++ is increasingly becoming a language where you do pay for what you don't use, especially if this syntax ever takes off, which it won't. That basically enforces certain guidelines. I mean, when the hell did core guidelines? I mean, they're guidelines. They shouldn't need to be enforced. What they should do really is make the language have some compile time. Give me more power over the compiler, so I can say, oh, in this function, I don't want there to be pointer arithmetic. There we go. Problem solved. Or I say at the beginning of my 20 million line code base, I say, look, don't compile if you find any instance of pointer arithmetic. And then you go in and then you go and fix them if you don't want them. Right? It gives you the power. I think what the issue is here is that they're stuck. Rust is really rustled their jimmies. I think a lot of people in C++ because I think that these talking heads and the modern C++ people have invested a lot of time in trying to proselytize modern C++ and learning it. And now Rust has come along and has basically done everything better from modern C++. And now they're scrambling to kind of come up with a reason why to stick with C++. The answer to those people is you should just go, because C++. I don't. This is going to be, maybe this is gatekeeping, but I honestly think this. I just don't think it's, if you're not doing kind of bottom up problem solving where you think you need a lot of power and control over exactly what you're doing, then C++ is not the language for you. And I think they're trying to meld it into this language that doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. It's called Rust. But the argument is they're never going to beat Rust when it comes to language specified memory safety. They're just not. Because Rust has basically redefined what memory safety is to mean whatever Rust does. So you cannot win that argument. You're never going to win that argument. What they should do is focus on the strengths that C++ has, which is compile time, features, a bottom-up approach to things, low-level control over data. That those things should be like stop saying that pointer arithmetic. And I don't even use pointer arithmetic, but it annoys me. Stop saying that like using a union is like it's almost morally bad. This is the thing I have a problem with. This is the argument being made now. It's not only was it bad because it wasn't in the guidelines, now it's morally bad. Now you're intentionally creating security risks in your code. Well, maybe I know my code better than you do. Maybe I need a union in this one place. Maybe I need to use a pointer here because it actually makes it simpler. And if it makes it simpler, I'm less likely to make mistakes. Because that's the thing they never really talk about is, well, Herb Sutter does actually mention it, which is, he kind of mentions it indirectly, which is logic errors. So I think at one point in this video, I really should just play this video. You need to watch this video before watching this because you won't understand what I'm talking about. But somewhere in here, he lists off the biggest security vulnerabilities, one of them being out of bounds memory access, which obviously is a problem, which he addresses. The other one being SQL injections, which essentially is sanitizing input. Now he just says, well, of course you should sanitize your input, and then just moves on, which I find very interesting because you could just turn around and say exactly the same thing. Well, of course you shouldn't go out of bounds in your array access. Are you stupid or something? Like, if we're making these arguments, we have to apply them equally. Sometimes sanitizing input is you'll make a mistake. Okay, you're going to make a mistake. What the hell does a span, how's a span going to help me there? What is going to help me there? What will help me is giving more power to the programmer over their tools. Why can't I tell a compiler not to use certain constructs in the language? Why is that not? I do not understand. This is like a big black hole that no one's thinking of here. Well, I'm sure they are, but I think the problem is you can't teach. If there isn't a new feature every 4 years, what are you going to teach in your training course that you charge however much money? If the language stays the same, then there's nothing new to teach, right? I mean, that's the cynical take here, which I'm starting to think is probably true. A lot of talking heads. There's a lot of talking heads when it comes to programming, and a lot of them are saying things that are just bad. And I'm starting to think they're not really motivated with the same way that the average programmer perhaps is motivated. But anyway, there's my litigious comment, which I'll probably be sued for. But anyway, go away.